This is part 9 of this complete front-end development course that we are working on. If you are following this series, you must have watched the last 8 videos, and in all those videos mostly what we did was we talked about some of the core React concepts, and mainly we set up a nice development environment and setting up a nice structure. So that all these up until now, up until to this point, everything that we did has been about making our work a little easier, making our project a little easier to read, a little easier to understand, and also has a nice structure. But going forward, we are going to start writing components and start writing tests for each of the component. So the next videos or the upcoming videos that you will see in this course will be about writing components and writing tests for the component in the same video. Okay, so every single time I write a new component, I'm going to make a new video, and if it's a typography component, I'm going to make like this video will be about wrapping up the layout component, but each of the video will contain a new component that we write, okay, that we are going to write, and then that video will also have the component, and it will also have the test for that component using Cypress. Okay, so that's what it is going to be. So for this video, let's wrap up some of the components we already have under packages, under utils, under src, under components, under this with system props higher order component. I am satisfied with all the extra props and extra functionalities that this component, this higher order component provides. So I am happy with that, but to test this with system props higher order component, we will come back to this later. But the first thing we'll do is we will test some of the core components that we already have. So in this video, we will test this layout component. We will complete this layout component and write a test. Okay, so let's open up that layout.tsx file. We already wrote this in last video. If you have not watched that video, go and watch my previous videos, okay, because you will need to watch my previous videos in order to follow this. So this layout component is used for theming purpose. As you can see, it provides a background color of props.theme.mode. So let me open the theme files too. So under utils, assets, themes, let's open this mod light theme and dark theme, because we will need this in order to reference the colors. So let's wrap up this layout component. Everything should look good here. There's nothing to change because this was already done. This layout will wrap our entire application, and it will provide the background color in order to compensate, in order to adjust the themes, okay, light theme and dark theme. So the background color is props.theme.mode, and if you go to mod light theme, then mode is white. So for light theme, the background color is going to be white. For dark theme, the mode is this 121111 hex color. This is a darker, not completely black, but a darker color. Okay, so that's where this color, this background color is being used from the theme. So define a layout. Okay, but make sure you forward the ref, and let's finally write because we will be writing test for this layout component. Let's write data.test is equals to layout. Okay, and this data attribute is a valid HTML attribute. So you look at the HTML, the MDN documentation, okay, as data is a valid HTML attribute, dash, we can supply any values. If we want to write our name as data test ID, we can do that. Data testing, we can do that, whatever keyword you want to provide. But for all the main components, the core components, I'm just going to write it as data dash and only test. Okay, there are some use cases where in the future videos in other components we will specify data dash test ID just for the naming convention, but for now, for all the core components, leave it to data dash test. The test name is layout. Okay, it renders some children, and then it is wrapped, the layout component is wrapped with forward ref and with system props. Okay, so that is it for the layout component. Let's write a simple test for this. Again, I made a separate video as I had been talking about. I already did that. That is already up on my channel. It's called complete guide to testing, where we talked about end-to-end tests, integration tests, unit test, and test doubles, dummies, stuff, fake, and mock. I think it's really important for you to understand the basic testing concept, because throughout this series, as I said, this course, entire course, is a complete, we follow a complete 100% test-driven development approach. Okay, we want to make sure that each component we write, each component we develop, has been thoroughly tested. If it has not been tested, we're not going to be safe, we're not going to feel safe, and nobody is going to feel safe. Nobody wants to use anything that you write if it has not been tested. Okay, so that's why we want to focus on test-driven development. And some of the concepts that we will be using while testing is the concepts that I talked about in my separate testing video. Okay, I'll post a link to that video down in the description for you to watch. Apparently nobody wants to watch about testing videos, but I think it's super important. I like to follow test-driven development, so go and watch that. Okay, because there are concepts that we'll be using throughout this course, and if I'm using those concepts, and if you are wondering what does that mean, what does this test mean, what does dummies, fake, stub, mock, end-to-end test, integration test mean, if you are asking yourself that question, then you have not watched that video and it is not going to help. Okay, you need to know about testing. If you already know about testing, do not need to watch that video, jump right into it. Okay, but for now, let's come to this layout folder. Let's create a new file called a test file. We'll call it a spec. Okay, so layout.spec.tsx. okay, so in this layout.spec.tsx, what we'll do is we'll import React first, import React from React. And when we are writing tests throughout the series, especially for this video, this test is going to be super simple. Okay, so we will start from writing simple tests, and then we will move on to writing more and more complex tests. Okay, but if you look at the simple layout component, is it doing anything special? No, nothing at all. Okay, it is supplying this hard-coded background color value. Well, it is not hard-coded, it changes depending on whether it is light theme or dark theme, but it is still hard-coded value. Okay, background color is still hard-coded value. We do not need to test whether the background color is props.theme.mode or not, like in here, this mode. We do not need to check that here because this background color is hard-coded. We are not applying any conditions to have that background color. Okay, so we do not need to check for background color. And again, I explained this in that testing video, what to test, when to test, and the most important thing is we need to make sure that we are checking the right thing. Okay, we are not trying to check for implementation, we are trying to check for the behavior of a component or the behavior of the function that we write. Okay, we are not trying to check whether our code is implemented correctly or not. We are trying to check whether our code is giving the behavior that we want. That's what we are trying to check. Okay, so in this case, we do not need to check for background color. Layout props, all it is doing is rendering some children. We know that it rendered children, it already works, it has been tested by React. Okay, but if we come down here, this with system props has not been tested yet. Okay, and this forward ref is already from React. We do not need to check for forward ref, we do not need to test forward ref. Okay, but with system props, I do like to check it because this is a higher order component that we wrote in the last videos. So I do want to check if the extra props from with system props has actually been applied, like the margin or padding from with system props has actually been applied to the layout component, which might not make sense, but let's say that the background color from with system props, is it applied to the layout component? That's the thing that I would like to check. Okay, so this test is going to be super simple, so let's go ahead get into it. So import styled from styled components. So we will need to check whether the styled components is actually applying the correct styles. Okay, on our layout component, we are not checking for styled components, we are not checking for this style function from style components, we are checking whether that styles has actually been applied to the mod layout. Okay, again, know what to test, know when to test, and know if you are testing the right thing. That is the main three things about testing. Okay, very important thing. And in order to, we also want to check, so for the styled, we will need to check if, so because we can use styled just like we did here, styled, in order to style the div. In our test case, what we'll do is we will use this styled, and then we will wrap this layout component with the styled and make sure that if the actual styles has been applied or not. That's what we are doing, okay, by importing that style. Let's also import a plain CSS file, which we do not have it right now, but let's create a new file called style.css. Okay, and this styles, let me remove that import. It is just showing error that I don't like. Let's create the styles.css file. If we look at your Cypress folder, inside that folder there is fixes, and inside that fixes folder there is this file called example.json. So this is a test file that we will be, this fixer folder will be using this in the future, but for now we do not need any JSON file. All we need is a CSS file. Okay, so let's create a new file called style.css, and in the style.css file let's write a simple styles. So I will give that more higher precedence. Test.test. Padding is, let's apply 32 pixels. Any padding, same with margin 32 pixels. Okay, so we are trying to see if whenever we provide styles to custom class name to layout component, is that actually adding this margin and padding of 32 pixels each. Okay, so that's why we will import that styles, the CSS file. So import dot slash that's in Cypress, fixes, and style.css. Did I have the file name correctly? Style.css, I do. Let's save that, and let's also import the theme providers, mod theme provider. Let's also import light theme and dark theme so that we can check our layout component that is going to provide the background colors to the to our light theme and dark theme. Okay, let's also import dark theme, and let's finally import the typography component, because so that we can see if the background color is being applied by writing something on it on the layout component. And now finally import layout component. Okay, import layout, and that is just basically going to do it on its own. So we'll first write a test suite describe, and I'm going to put that in a nice, I'm going to do that layout, and whenever you're writing test, this will define a context here. So context is basically, so whenever you see this describe block, this is called a test suite. So this inside this describe, we will have all our test cases. Okay, that is called so this describe block describes a test suite, and inside this describe block we can also write context in order to group things. Okay, so this context can be called a re-ender, and inside this context, so context means just basically grouping things together. Okay, should re-ender default layout component. Okay, so let's go ahead and mount that layout component in the Cypress window here. This is where it's going to, not in this typography, but it is going to have right here, it already created the layout.spec.tsx file, as we can see there. This is where it's going to mount the layout component. Okay, using sci.mount. So sci.mount, let's provide a theme first, because mod theme provider theme is equals to, let's just apply mod light theme for now, and then let's actually use that layout component, and let's write something inside it using typography. It does not have any variants yet, because we have not provided any variants to typography component, which we are going to do in the next video. Okay, in the next video right after this. So I'll just type instead of lorem ipsum, I'll just type hello world. Okay, and let's save that and then see if anything comes up here. So there is an error. The following was from a test packaging utils build types. I don't know why it's this one here. I don't know why it's not pulling out from the Mozilla/utils package by when it auto completes it, but Mozilla/YouTube/utils. Okay, and then save that and then see there's hello world, and if we inspect the element there, so this h1 tag is wrapped inside this layout. Okay, and as you can see, background color is white because we are using mod light theme, and this typography hello world is wrapped with the layout component that we are writing test for. Okay, and as you can see, let me close that was from last video. This h1 element is wrapped with that layout component, and you should also see div class, you see that with system props underscore layout, you see that we have a nice naming convention so that we can figure out where did something come from, because this layout component is wrapped with system props, and also the component name is layout component. Okay, you'll see a nice name there, and also our data test is layout. Okay, so we have the layout there with the background color of white. Let's change this background, or not background color, let's change the theme. So mod dark theme. So once I save that, provided mod dark theme, okay, that should be black now. Okay, the background color should be black. There, the background color, not completely black, but darker background. Okay, so that was the rendering. So there's nothing much going on in this particular test case. All we'll do is we'll do a sci.get. Okay, and we will check to see if this layout component actually exists in the DOM. We know that we exist, like we looked at it visually, we confirmed visually that it exists, but we do not want to do this every single time. We want to write a test in order to confirming it manually by opening up Cypress window. We want to do this automatically, okay, by using sci.get. And how can we get this layout component? How can we get this layout component to this particular div on the back there that is wrapping h1 tag? We can get this using the data test, okay, because we supplied the data test attribute to this layout component. Data test is layout, so we can get the layout component by using data test. Okay, data test, and this is a little tedious syntax here, but we will write a custom command in Cypress in order to make this a little easier. But just to remember the syntax, let's just write it right like that. Now should exist. So now what we are doing is we are mounting a layout component, also a typography component. We are mounting, especially since we are checking for layout component, we want to focus on layout. We are mounting the layout component, and we are checking, does the layout component exist in the DOM? It should exist. We are stating that it should exist in the DOM. Okay, so now let's go and see if the test pass. Okay, you can see that should render default layout component. That was the description of the it block, and then we are trying to get data test equals to layout, and then we are expecting it to exist, okay, in the DOM. Okay, so see, expected div with system prop layout to exist in the DOM. So the test case pass. Can I fail this test case? I can do this by using not exist. Now what is this going to do? We are expecting that layout should not exist in the DOM. Is that going to return true or false? It is going to return false because it exists. It is going to give us an error here, okay, in Cypress. See, data test layout, it is expecting, see, it is expecting this layout component to not exist in the DOM, but then it was continuously found. Okay, so that is the very simple. Let's change that to exist because it exists. That is for the re-render context. Okay, that is black. Let's write now the context, because there are a few things that we need to check even in this simple layout component. Okay, so let's check for props, and I explained this in last video. We do not, because this layout component is wrapped with this with system props higher order component that we did in the last videos. If you are wondering what that is, I have a nice thumbnail that I did, and each of the thumbnail contains the title or for the component that we are working on, and also the title on YouTube, on my YouTube title. You should see the with system props, or in some thumbnails you should see with system props, but that was in maybe 1 or 2 videos. Or maybe was it in the last, not in, yeah, maybe it was in the last video that we did. Okay, so go and watch that, this with system props. Okay, so but for this props, we do not want the props supplied by with system props such as n, that is margin, p, padding, busy, color. We do not want it in the DOM. Okay, so we need to check that, okay, whether that props is in the DOM or not. And this is just for the safety. You do not have to check it, because we know that should for our props function it works, but just for the safety I do want to check this, because sometimes I might forget to wrap some component with the with system props, or sometimes something might go wrong. That's why I would like to check it. So this test case will be should include only valid props in the DOM. Okay, valid props, or let's call it attributes. Okay, And what we'll do here is we can just copy this side.mount here. Let's copy that, re-enter that layout component, and now let's provide some of the props, some of the valid and invalid props. Okay, some of the valid HTML attributes are class name is a valid HTML attribute, so class name or class is a valid HTML attribute, but when we are writing in JSX we need to use class name, the camel case. Class name, I'll just specify that as test class. Okay, so class name is a valid attribute, and if I come and paste it over here in layout, you'll see that class name has been applied to the layout component that is test class. Okay, that is valid. Class HTML attribute, HTML element can contain class name attribute, and we already have, let's say I want to modify the data test attribute. Data test is equals to, let's just specify test. Okay, let's come back and check it over here, and I'm going with this thoroughly because this is the first test that we are writing, but in the future videos I'm not going to do this because I think it's super simple concepts. But data test is layout data test, because data test was already layout. Let's specify a different keyword there, data test ID, and we should see that data test ID indeed is in that div, okay, in that layout component. So test class, that's a class name. Data test ID is test. Data test equals to layout. This comes from the actual layout component. This is the data test ID equals to test is the one that comes from the spec file here. Okay, so that, and so these are all the valid. Class name and data test ID is a valid attribute. Let's supply invalid props. Okay, so for example, can a div, layout is a div, can a div contain a HTML attribute or a attribute called m? No, it cannot. But this m is margin of 32 pixels comes from this with system props higher order component that we wrote in the last videos. Okay, but should this m be in the DOM element? No, it's not. But should this m equals to 32 apply margin of 32 to the actual div element? Yes, of course it should. Okay, so let's go ahead and verify that. So m32, I think that already applied. Let's supply a bigger value for this so that we do not have to check for the styles in the inspector. So let's apply margin of 100. You can see that margin of 100 is being applied. That div is down. And then let's also verify that m is not in the DOM. We do not want m attribute in the in this div element. Okay, so we have class, that is random class generated by style components, and that's a class name test class. Data test ID is test. Data test is equals to layout. There is no m property there. Okay, m attribute there, which is good, because what happens again, if we looked at it in the last video, if we do not, because we have forwarded props, we have not forwarded this m props and all the other props, that's why we do not see the m value here. But if you somehow see the m value in this HTML element, it will give you an error. In development it might give you a warning, but in production React will definitely give you an error. Okay, so watch out for that. So it include only valid props attributes in the DOM, so we provide these valid and invalid attributes, and we manually went there and tested to see that only the valid attributes are in the element, the div element, and not the invalid attributes. So let's go ahead and instead of checking it manually, we'll write a test for this again. Okay, so what we'll do is, let me do that, no space there, it doesn't matter. But so site.get data test is, let's remove this data test ID. Okay, I think it's creating confusion here, but we already have data test equals to layout, so let's use this site.data test layout should exist, which is okay. We already checked for existence, so we can now check for should have dot attribute. Should the layout component have attribute class name? It should. Okay, but in HTML the attribute, correct attribute is class. Okay, so we'll write class there. It should have attribute class. Okay, and then site.get data test is equals to layout should have attribute. Well, it should, well, there's no other attribute, but let's say that if there is a style attribute, which is again a valid HTML attribute, style is equals to, let's say that I supply a padding of, let's say 20 pixels. it should have attribute style, okay, because style is a valid HTML attribute, and we are providing style to the layout component to override styles, and this inline styles has the highest specificity, which will come in the next test cases that we'll write here. But for now, it should have attribute style, and again, to verify this, go to this, and it's already applying the styles or the padding, right? You can see that big space, but we do not go and manually check each time, okay? We write a test for this, and it's just going to be a lot easier in the future. So class name should exist, or should have attribute class name, right? Layout should have attribute style, but should layout have attribute m? No, it should not have an attribute m. So let's write a test for that. Site.get layout should not have attribute this time, should not have attribute m, okay? M is margin, it's because m is not a valid HTML element, okay? And let's apply this m value to be 32, just so that we are consistent with the style.css here too. And let's also supply a padding of 32 so that we can check for padding too. Site.get, again, should not have attribute, it should not have attribute p or padding, which is not a valid HTML attribute, okay? So that is the test for the valid props or attributes in the DOM. So let's go ahead and run that. We can see that we have 2 test cases passing, okay? And if we would like to, because we can have a lot of test cases in some other complex components, so what if you do not, because right now it seems like it is only running or showing this last test cases, but what if we want to see this, the first test case that it ran? So what we can do is, so let's say that if we only want to see should render default layout component, what we can do is we can provide it dot only. If we write only there, it is only going to run this test case, okay? So render default layout component, and I don't even need to refresh, it's already hot reloading it. See, it is only running 1 test, okay? And to run a single context, well, we'll see this later, but we can also provide context dot only, and it is going to run every single test case that is inside that context, inside this render context, okay? But for now, let's do that. This props looks good. Okay, so the next thing we'll be writing for the layout component is we will be testing to see if whether the styles from with system props has been applied correctly or not, okay? And this will be, and also we'll also be testing whether the styles from style.css is being applied or not to layout component, and also we will see whether the inline styles is being applied or not to the layout component. So we'll do that over here, okay? We'll write a test for that. So let's define now the context, and I'm going to call this system props, and I'm also going to call this system props and global styles. So global styles can mean styles from style.css or even inline styles, but I guess I could pick a good name for this, but that should be okay. It should override default styles and add new styles from with system props SOC, okay? We're basically trying to test if the with system props SOC style is being applied when we supply some props from that higher order component, okay? So let's copy and paste the site.mount here. I don't want to type it all in. Site.mount layout. So let's remove this because so now let's use some of the props provided by this with system prop SOC. This provides, of course, the margin, padding. There are tons of, I think, 40-50 other props that this with system props SOC provides. But for now, let's just use the margin and padding. And if margin and padding is working correctly, then we know the other props are also working correctly. Okay, margin 32, padding 32. And we'll just write a test for this, site.get. Let's copy that. Site.get data test layout. We do not need to check for exist because we already, well, I guess we could check for exist too before checking for the XL margin and padding. So let me just copy this again, paste this again here. Should Now we are checking whether whether this margin of 32 is being applied or not. So what we can do is should have .css property is padding, and value is 32 pixels. Okay, let's save that. Let's do the same for the margin also. Okay, we just did for padding. Let's copy that. Same thing for should have margin of 32 pixels. Okay, so let's save that, and then let's not go and manually check each time. Okay, because this is not worth it. In order to this is not worth it to check it manually. We do not do that. We write a test for this and we automate things. Okay, we are not manually checking anything. So let's come to let's come to test here. What I meant by that is we are not inspecting every time, and even in real world we are not going to do that. As you can see here, when I inspected, margin and padding of 32 pixels is being applied, which is good. Okay, and this test case also passed. It is overriding default styles and add new styles from with system props HOC. Is it overriding styles? So let's go ahead and see that if it is actually overriding styles in layout. Okay, to see if it is actually overriding styles from with system props HOC, let's provide a margin value of, let's provide 100 pixels margin value and see if it is actually overriding it. Okay, so in layout, margin is for example 100 pixels, and in layout spec I'm trying to override this margin to be 32 pixels. So is it going to apply this margin 32 from with system props hierarchy component? Let's see that. Margin 32 pixels, and you see that margin of 100 pixels is getting cut over there. Okay, because we are overriding it. So overriding also works, and this overriding works. I am pretty sure, I don't know what I'm missing here, but this with system props, you will need to provide a CSS precedence for this. Okay, did we? Yeah, you will need to ampersand. Okay, I will make, when I remember exactly what happened when I did this, I will probably make a new video about this, but make sure you provide the precedence here, the specificity. Okay, 2 ampersands for now. And there was reason why I did that, but I do not remember it on top of my head, and I did not make a note. Okay, but the with system props HOC is working. The next thing we'll do is, because this layout component can also be styled with styled from styled components. Okay, with styled functions from styled components. So we'll write a test for this too. So let's just go and copy this it block here. Let's paste that there. And we'll also describe it differently here. So should override. You know what override works? Should add styles. We'll just do that. Should add styles from styled styles when wrapped with styles. Styled when wrapped with styled from styled. Okay, so side out mount. Before doing side out mount, let's define styled layout. Okay, and we'll use styled from styled components and supply that layout component. Okay, so this is what the user using our library will do, because are the users going to be, so in this layout, let's remove that margin. So in this layout component, it's very simple, but in complex component, let's say that the user, let's say we have, for some reason we have a padding of 32 pixels or even margin of 100 pixels, but is this user going to want this 100 pixels in layout component? Okay, maybe not, and maybe they want to use styled components. They are using styled component. Maybe they want to modify that layout component and remove that margin of 100 pixels. Okay, so when they want to do that, they can use styled and then wrap the layout component with the styled and then provide their own style. Okay, so margin was 100 pixels. Let's set the margin to 32 pixels. So the user wants to set the margin to 32 pixels here instead of 100 pixels. Okay, so what the user can do is they can wrap the layout component from Mod.js/core, okay, and wrap it with style components and provide margin. Let's also provide padding. Okay, padding of 32 pixels. Maybe they want to provide margin and padding. So they can do that. So now we need to check if the margin of 32 and padding of 32 has actually been applied because of styled function from which styled components. Let's remove that because we are not M32 and P32 that inline props from with layout with system props higher component. We don't need that there. So that's that. Should have CSS margin 32, padding 32, everything should be the same. But since we are styling this layout component using styled, we'll need to use this style layout over here. Okay, so wrap that typographic component with style layout, save it, and then see if our fourth test case passed. So add styles when wrap with style from style components. That did work. Okay, and it should also override it. Margin of 100 pixels is being overridden. Margin is 32, padding is 32. Okay, just like before. So that was the second test case for this. Let's write a third test case for this. Okay, so let's copy this. And we can also check this. It is wise to check this, but what we're doing is we're trying to check should add inline styles with highest precedence. Okay, so let's check for this also. Okay, just so that we're on the safe side here. We do not need that styled there, and let's change this back to layout. Let's change that to should add inline styles with highest precedence. Okay, as you can see, the hard-coded value for layout is margin to be 100 pixels in the component, but we'll change this. Okay, I'll remove this at the end of the video eventually because we do not want margin 100 pixels. This is just for testing purpose. So layout, let's add inline styles. Style is equals to, instead of margin 100 pixels, I want to add inline styles and change that margin to 32 pixels. That should be in a quote. And also let's add a padding of 32 pixels. Okay, 32 pixels. There should be a comma there after styles. So let's save that and let's check if this is actually adding inline styles with highest precedence. It is doing that. Again, we can see here the inline styles is being added in the element itself because we are using style. Okay, that's a valid HTML attribute. Style equals to margin 32, padding 32. We can see it in the DOM. Okay, but we will not be doing this manually. As I said, we'll be writing tests for every single thing. Okay, and it is automated and it is a lot faster too. So that is about inline styles. Now there is a final test case that we write for this layout component, and that is whether this styles from a file style.css is actually being applied or not. Okay, so should add custom class names and override, as well as add styles, as well as from a separate CSS file. And instead of, this is a different test case, let's provide a class name. Layout class name is equals to layout class name is equals to layout, or you know what, I'll just write class test because in other components, so that we can just copy and paste this entire test case, but class name is class test. This should also be changed. You know what, let's also just specify these as test. Okay, so that the class name of test and style.css files class name matches here. So class name is test, and instead of margin 100 pixels, we are supplying the margin of 32 and also padding of 32. Okay, then we are providing a class name in this layout component. Let's save that and then see if it is actually working. Okay, so there are custom class names and override, as well as add styles from a separate CSS file. This is working. There is this ESLint yellow warning there. Let's go and fix that. We are not using something here, so we are not using light theme. I still want to keep import light theme in this test file. Okay, but everywhere here we have not used a light theme anywhere, so let's go ahead and use that light theme too, and that ESLint warning will go away. Let's use it at the end here. Let's save that. the background is light theme now. Okay, it's good. And of course, when we change themes, in light theme this typography will be blue color or maybe some other colors, and in dark theme it should be different color, right? So right now it is not doing that because in typography component the h1 tag, so this is the h1 tag is hard coded to a value of blue. That's why this typography is always blue. But in the next video we will complete the typography component too, so that it adjusts with the light theme and dark theme. Okay, but we'll do that in the next video. But for the layout component, that is all the tests that we want to write, because there was nothing too complex going on in this test. Now let's remove this margin 102 because we do not want 100 pixels margin in the layout component. We still want this background color. So we do not have much to test here because all it did was apply a background color. There was no any conditions. We did not check for anything and then re-enter this or re-enter that. That's why this test was super simple. And there are a lot of components where the test will be super simple, and there are some complex component where the spec file, this test case is going to be super complex too. Okay, but we tested for with system props. Okay, and we tested whether that prop is actually forwarded or not. So all these test cases here, so this entire test case, the test block, and all or this test suite, and each of these test case, this props and system and global styles, we will write this or we'll just copy and paste and modify some things in every single component we'll write. Okay, because every single component under core and icons will be wrapped with system props, higher order component. Okay, so but that was it. Let me close some of this. The layout component is done and also testing is done. Let me close this so that the next time we come we are in the same space here. So that was it for this video. In the next video we will wrap up a typography component, and also we will write tests for that typography component. See ya.